we'll stop that music. All right, guys. Happy Wednesday. Can you guys let me know in the comments if you can hear me? I was having a lot of issues with sound and my microphone and audio, so just let me know in the comments if you can hear me. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm more worried about you guys being able to hear the videos. Hello, hello. Good to see you guys. Thanks for tuning in. It seems like I get more views when we're talking about Jay Dyer. When we're crapping all over Jay Dyer. All right, so yeah, this is gonna be Mike sounds like a deprivation chamber, but it's fine. Yeah, that's not good. Let me see. Is the volume at least good? Is the volume of the mic at least decent, despite the fact that it sounds like I'm in a well? Okay, I don't know. I mean, this is a pretty good mic I have, so I don't know why it sounds like that, but oh well. I think we'll trudge on. So yeah, look, I don't want to come to be known as the channel that just shits all over Jay Dyer. I've made 2 long form videos regarding his content, about tag and then about his ridiculous scientific beliefs or pseudo-scientific beliefs. In fact, I just made a short, I don't know if it was last week or 2 weeks ago, where I finally heard him admit that that he doesn't believe the Earth is round. So, I mean, I wasn't really surprised, but it was funny to finally find a clip like that. Yeah, so I don't want to become known as the channel that's just always posting Jay Dyer content, but I still get comments all the time from people asking me if I can do more Jay Dyer content. And it just so happens that I was driving this past weekend. I was picking up breakfast for my girls, and I like to listen to YouTube videos, not watch them. I just listen to them as I'm driving. And a Jay Dyer video came up, and I couldn't help but laughing out loud as I was watching the video because it was so ridiculous. Yeah, I thought Jay Dyer was pretty well versed in logic, but some of the stuff he says. So we're actually going to survey 3 videos of his. They're all pretty short. The first one's like 10 minutes. The second one's like 6 or 7 minutes, and then the third one is a little bit longer. But yeah, just on all 3 of these, I think Jay Dyer understands classical logic really well, but it's the other formal systems of logic that he doesn't understand. And this atheist that called in, I actually don't know if he was an atheist, but he called into Jay's show. I don't know when this took place because it's just one of those YouTube channels that just clips different clips of Jay Dyer. So I don't know when the stream was. Sometimes you could tell how old the videos are based on Jay's haircut because his hair is always changing. Oh, hey, John Buck. I didn't know that was you. Good to see you, man. Nice of you to join. Yeah, so anyways, I don't know when the first video was from, but I'd never seen it before. And this atheist just runs circles around Jay. And what's funny is, if you don't really understand logic that well or different formal systems, you walk away from the video thinking, no, Jay creamed that guy, but actually it's the other way around. And I think Jay, because he doesn't understand different formal logical systems, thinks he won this debate with an atheist. So that's going to be our first video. It's going to be a lot of fun. Jojo Mojo said, were you going to debate Jay or Jim Bob? Oh, John Buck, I've been good, man. I hope you've been good as well. Oh, John's answering. Hopeful atheist. Sorry. Yeah, no, Jay blocked me on Twitter. I don't know why, because with him, I haven't really been vitriolic or petulant or anything like that. So I don't even remember why he blocked me. I didn't even attack him at all. I don't remember why, but he blocked me. So I don't know that there's any chance. I don't even think I'm on Jay's radar, to be honest, which is fine. I mean, I don't need to be. But with regards to Jim Bob, I don't know what Jim Bob's issue is, because when I made the video on Jim Bob, I explicitly challenged him to a debate. And then I went on, when he did a response to me, his live stream response, in the comments, I asked him again, can we set up a debate? And then he said yes after Lent. And then he asked what the prompts were going to be. And then I listed what I thought would be some good prompts. He never got back to me. And then on Twitter, yes, Jay is an overgrown baby, as we're going to see in these videos. Well, Jim Bob is too. Like they're both petulant, they're both arrogant. But with regards to Jim Bob, I've asked him and I've tagged him multiple times on Twitter. I want to say like at least 6 or 7 times. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. And I keep asking him, can we set up a debate? And then sometimes he ignores me. And then sometimes when he answers me, he says, well, what's the prompt? And I'm like, dude, I've already told you what the prompts can be. And then once he finally like reads what the prompts are, he asks me if I'm going to be taking a position in the debate, which of course, like, why would I debate you if I'm not going to take a position? So, and then from there, he never answers me. So I don't know. And it's weird because he doesn't seem, I don't want to say Jim Bob's scared to debate. I don't think he is. Although I've kind of poked him with a stick on Twitter to asking him if he is scared to debate. But I don't know why he just doesn't want to agree to a debate with me. So whatever, we'll see if anything comes of that. But as of right now, I do not have any debates lined up with Jim Bob or Jay Dyer. So, oh well. All right. So, okay. So again, we're going to look at 3 videos. What we are going to do though is, and I hope you guys will stay with me, when we hit the first video, again, we're talking about like formal systems and logic. And so for some of us, for some of you, if you don't know different formal systems and logic or even what a formal system is, again, you're going to walk away from that first video thinking like the first video of Jay Dyer, and you're going to think Jay Dyer like creamed this atheist. But yeah, he didn't. So what I want to do is we're going to start the first video and then we're going to stop it like towards the beginning. And then I'm just going to do a quick deep dive into formal systems of logic and why they're important and why it's important to understand that there are different formal systems in logic, because that's going to kind of hinge on how we demonstrate that Jay doesn't really know what he's talking about. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start the first video, and I really need you guys to let me know if you can hear the audio on the video, because the only reason I'm wearing these is because I can't hear the audio from my speakers, but I can hear them from my headphones. So I just want to make sure you guys can hear them. So I actually haven't seen the Jay Dyer Trent Horn debate. And Jay Dyer's been, I just don't get the dude, man. He's such an asshole. Like he's been shitting all over Gavin Ortland, or maybe that's Jim Bob. One of them has been like shitting all over Gavin Ortland, and Gavin Ortland's like the nicest dude, and then so is Trent Horn. Like, and they keep, it's like friendly fire. Like you guys are all believers. I get it. Trent Horn's not an Eastern Orthodox, but I mean Trent Horn's a super nice guy. I haven't seen their debate though, so I need to go and watch it. But all right, so let me go ahead and start the first video. Yeah, I agree with that. God himself could call into a show and refute Tag, and Jay and his followers would still walk away. Yes. Yes, they would. Yes, they would. All right, guys. Okay. So this video, again, this is not from Jay's YouTube channel. This is from, I don't know if this is, I don't think this is another one of his, but I think this is somebody else who clips his videos. And so the title is Smug Atheist tries to debunk Tag. and I think what we'll see in the video, as is usual, is Jay Dyer's the smug one here. The atheist is actually, and again, I don't even know if this is an atheist in this video, but this individual is actually super calm and super patient with Jay, despite the fact that clearly Jay doesn't understand what he's talking about. So, okay, can you guys just let me know if you can hear this? So I'm just going to start playing it. Let me know if you can hear the audio. All right, were you guys able to hear that? And actually, I don't even see, hold on. Yeah, I started playing it, but I just realized that I didn't even have it on the screen. So that might be why. Let me see. Sorry, guys, this is my second time streaming, so there's a very good chance that I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. All right, let me try it.
They're going to have the conclusion that essentially the God worldview is the only worldview that can account for intelligibility, right? And the method to demonstrate something like this is going to be to do a worldview analysis.
So were you guys able to hear that? I just played a small. Okay, great. Awesome. I was really worried that you wouldn't be able to hear it. Okay, so I'm going to start the clip, and then again, I'm going to, thank you. I'm going to start the clip, and then I'm going to stop it at a certain point, and then we're going to jump into formal systems really quick. We're not going to take too long, but I just want to make sure. Yes, this is the trivialist one. Yes, this is the trivialist one. So then we're going to jump into formal systems for just a bit, because I just want to make sure I explicate it so all the viewers understand what we're doing here. And then we'll jump back into the video. So I'm going to start the video again, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, so my critique, I've got a critique of the presuppositional methodology I'm curious to hear your response to.
Okay.
So essentially, the precept method is going to be, they're going to have the conclusion that essentially the God worldview is the only worldview that can account for intelligibility, right? And the method to demonstrate something like this is going to be to do a worldview analysis, usually. So they're going to set you up, two different worldviews: the God worldview and the not God worldview.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to take on the presuppositions of your opponent's position and do an internal critique
mm-hmm.
to demonstrate that their worldview fails on their own grounds. Now the problem is that I don't think this can deliver on its promise. The reason being is there are some worldviews that are just not in principle falsifiable. That is, that any given proposition that you could posit is going to be symmetric with their position. Positions like trivialism, positions like dialetheism. There's plenty of different paraconsistent logic positions. Each one of these is not going to be in principle falsifiable.
Okay, so there's where I'm going to stop it. So the interlocutor, who again doesn't even, it says that he's an atheist. I don't know that he's an atheist. What we're going to see in this video is the guy could be a Christian. Every point he makes could still be predicated, or not predicated, could be explicated by a Christian and still be completely valid. But if you notice, he just listed off trivialism, dialetheism, and then different paraconsistent logics. So, and then what's interesting is Jay goes, yeah, I know all of those. And then like 5 minutes later in the debate, he goes, no, wait, I don't know what trivialism is. So, which is interesting. But really quick, I just want to jump into formal systems, what they are, because if you don't understand that there's different formal logical systems, you're not gonna understand how Jay lost this debate. Okay, and it doesn't seem like Jay understands that either. So I want to jump into that really quick. I have a PowerPoint. It's not long. It's literally like 3 slides. So, all right. So let's talk about what a formal system is. Okay, a formal system, and there's like logical formal systems, there's mathematical formal systems, but a formal system deduces or derives theorems given certain rules of inference from axioms. So you start with axioms. You could think of it like a top down. So you start with axioms. Okay, and axioms are just like postulates. They're not proven. They're just assumed to be true. And so we go from the axioms, we use rules of inference, and from those rules of inference, we derive different theorems. So to just take a quick visual of this, so let's say we have a formal system which has 3 axioms. And again, we take those axioms in different ways that we apply rules of inference, we derive certain theorems, right? You can take, and again, this is just, this can be just like logical rules of inference. There's other rules of inference and different syntactical rules. But this is just a basic overview, right? So you start with certain axioms and you use the rules of inference, and then you derive certain theorems. And that's basically what makes up a formal system. And you can have different formal systems depending on the axioms that you start with, okay? So let me give you like a mathematical example. I think that'll help demonstrate this quite easily, which is Euclidean and non-Euclidean geometry. Sorry for the slides, the titles kind of got all messed up. But so if you took like high school level geometry, which hopefully most of us did, you saw Euclidean geometry, which is like all the angles of a triangle add up to 180, parallel lines never intersect. And so with Euclidean geometry, one of the axioms, I think there's 5 axioms of Euclidean geometry. And again, so axioms are just postulates. They're not proven. They're just assumed to be true. You might even argue that they're self-evident, but some logicians or philosophers might not agree with that. But nevertheless, one of the axioms in Euclidean geometry is that if you're given a line, so in the diagram I have, let's say you're given a line L, and then you're given a point A, one of the axioms in Euclidean geometry says there's only one line that can be drawn through A that is parallel to L. Okay, that's known as the parallel postulate. Again, it's an axiom of Euclidean geometry. And then from those axioms, there's other axioms in Euclidean geometry, you derive certain theorems, okay? But there's also non-Euclidean geometry. And there's two different types. As far as I know, there might be more, but there's two different types of non-Euclidean geometry. And those are predicated on either rejecting the axiom, the parallel postulate of Euclidean geometry, or reworking it. Okay, so in non-Euclidean geometry, you can have lines that appear parallel that do actually intersect. And one way to think of this, and you can even see it here with this sphere, think of it like the longitudinal lines of the Earth, right? If you're at the equator, two longitudinal lines will look parallel. They'll look like they never cross. Of course, you can't see longitudinal lines, right? But if you could see them, they would look like they never cross, but then they do end up crossing at the North Pole and the South Pole. So in non-Euclidean geometry, you can have lines that appear parallel that do actually cross, right? This is going to be really important because what Jay is going to end up doing is he's going to try to attack his interlocutor's logical system from inside his own logical system or his formal system, and that just doesn't work. Okay, it's not possible to do, or not that it's not possible to do that, but it's not. He thinks that it's an internal critique, and it's not. And then again, so just another example of Euclidean and non-Euclidean geometry. So here in Euclidean geometry, you have a triangle on a flat plane. So that triangle, we would say all the angles add up to 180. But if you look at the spherical and hyperbolic planes, you have angles that do not add up to 180. Maybe they're greater than 180, or maybe they're less than 180. But so again, we have here two different types of formal systems. All right. So now I really quickly want to jump back to what Jay's interlocutor, and then we'll continue the video. So thanks for sticking with me on that. So three things that Jay's interlocutor brought up is trivialism, dialetheism, and different pair-consistent logics. And so in case you don't know, sorry, let's take a step back. So let's look at the formal system of classical logic. So that's the system that usually most presuppositionalists and Jay Dyer, they promulgate, right? Classical logic, the formal system of classical logic, the axioms of that system are like the law of identity, the law of excluded middle, the law of non-contradiction. There's two more. One of them is called the principle of explosion. So that's the logical formal system that Jay's operating within. And look, that's the logical system that I operate within as well. But there are other formal systems. One of them is known as pair-consistent logic. And if you just Google pair-consistent logic, it rejects one of the axioms of classical logic. It rejects the principle of explosion. Again, I know this is technical. I'm trying not to be overly technical, but this is going to be really important so you can see why Jay doesn't understand what the hell he's talking about in this video. Okay, and then we'll get to the video, I promise. Thanks for sticking with me. Thanks, John Buck. So in pair-consistent logic runs on different axioms. And so because of that, in pair-consistent logic, it is possible to have a contradiction. A contradiction doesn't disrupt the system, whereas in classical logic, a contradiction would disrupt the system. It would make the system inconsistent. But in pair-consistent logic, it doesn't have that issue. And so there are philosophical views that are predicated on pair-consistent logic. One of those, like the interlocutor mentioned, is dialetheism. Dialetheism is the view that there can be true contradictions. Dialetheia, I think, just means true contradiction or something like that, like two truths. So under dialetheism, you can have actual contradictions. Now, you might say, well, but that's absurd. Well, yeah, that's absurd in a classical logical system, but it's not absurd in a pair-consistent logical system, right? Now, whether or not dialetheism is true, that's a whole different debate, okay? We're just talking about what the view is. Now, trivialism is crazy. I hadn't even heard of trivialism before this dude. Oh, thanks, Grace. Thanks a lot, guys. I'm just reading your comments. Sorry. Now, trivialism holds that all propositions are true. And this means even propositions that express a contradiction like P and not P. Or you could just say P is true, and it's also the case that not P is true, which would be a contradiction, again, which would be an issue in a classical logic formal system. But under like a pair-consistent logic or different logics that accept contradictions, it's not necessarily an issue. Now, whether or not you think trivialism is true, I don't. But the point is, and this is all it takes to defeat Jay's worldview, as we'll see in a little bit, all it takes is to be able to posit these possibilities that can't be falsifiable. And that's why you'll see Jay's interlocutor says there are these other worldviews or systems that are unfalsifiable. And in order for Tag to get off the ground, in order for the precept to make his argument, he has to demonstrate that these other worldviews are not possible or that they are falsifiable. Let's see. Sorry, I'm just reading the comments. Yeah, thank you, hopeful atheist. I appreciate that. Okay, so let's get back to the video. I'm going to stop it at certain points, but now that you hopefully understand the difference between these formal systems, hopefully you'll be able to see where Jay, like, he goes off the rails right away. Alrighty. I'm going to kind of move it back a little bit.
Method to demonstrate something like this is going to be to do a worldview analysis, usually. So they're going to set you up, two different worldviews, the God worldview and the not God worldview. Mm-hmm. And you're going to take on the presuppositions of your opponent's position and do an internal critique to demonstrate that their worldview fails on their own grounds. Now, the problem is that I don't think this can deliver on its promise. The reason being is there are some worldviews that are just not in principle falsifiable. That is, that any given proposition that you could posit is going to be symmetric with their position. Positions like trivialism, positions like dialetheism. There's plenty of different pair-consistent logic positions. Each one of these is not going to be in principle falsifiable. And so my critique is that if there are any non-falsifiable worldviews, just in principle, then the methodology can't deliver on its promise.
Right. And I understand this critique. I've heard it many times. And where I think this critique fails is that it's not understanding the larger claim of the transcendental argument. So the transcendental argument is not just making a claim about the intelligibility of worldviews. It's actually, the way I argue it, is it's an argument for an entire paradigm. So the reason that those objections don't work is that those objections don't actually give an account for the paradigm as a whole. So the argument is that Orthodox Christianity provides an account for all the elements and presuppositions that go into a coherent worldview, and thus it can provide a ground and a justification for all the transcendental categories and the possibility of knowledge and the possibility of ethics and the possibility of metaphysics. And so the examples that you gave are too limited in scope in that they can't give an account for any of those things that the paradigm as a whole for a Christian can give an account for.
All right, so really quick. So actually, there's not too much wrong with what Jay said here in terms of he's just kind of restating Tag, like only the Christian worldview can give account for the preconditions of intelligibility. But what his interlocutor is now gonna pivot to is, well, under trivialism, because remember, trivialism posits that all propositions are true, and any proposition that you can think of, that proposition is true, which means that all the propositions of the Christian Orthodox position are also true. So the trivialist is going to claim that he actually can account for everything that Jay's worldview can account for, or supposedly accounts for, because it includes all of those propositions.
So something like trivialism that wouldn't apply to, right? Like trivialism would hold that all of your positions, all of the positions that are the Eastern Orthodox position would be contained within trivialism. All propositions would be true. So unless you can, like, if the methodology is to attempt to falsify the opponent's position, right? Like,
how does that position,
sense, not just like an external critique from that position.
How does that position give an account for all of the transcendental categories?
It's going to be identical to your position, right?
Yeah, but that wouldn't be giving an account for the history of Christianity, the meaning of man and history, his origins, by just simply saying that, well, I have your position that includes all positions, right? That's not actually a position.
So yeah, Jay's wrong here, and he doesn't understand trivialism. And in a little bit, he admits he doesn't understand trivialism, which is interesting because again, just a couple minutes ago, he's like, "Yeah, I've heard all those positions before. They fail to account for X, Y, Z." But then in a minute, he demonstrates the interlocutor is going to ask him, like, "Do you even understand what trivialism is?" And he admits that he doesn't. So yeah, he doesn't understand yet what trivialism is, and since trivialism includes all propositions, it's going to include all the propositions of the history of Christianity and of the history of how God made man and how God is the preconditions of intelligibility and all of that. So yeah, Jay just doesn't understand that yet. And again, here's the really important part. Trivialism doesn't actually need to be true. I don't even know if the interlocutor is a trivialist, right? This is the thing that I think Jay also doesn't understand, as we'll see throughout this video. You don't actually have to believe trivialism is true. Remember that Jay's worldview, the precept worldview, is predicated on the impossibility of the contrary. So Jay's worldview is no other worldview other than the Orthodox Christian presuppositionalist worldview can possibly be true, right? It is necessarily true for knowledge, for metaphysics, for ethics, so on and so forth. So all the interlocutor needs to do is say, no, look, I have this position, trivialism. And again, he doesn't even have to affirm that he believes it or that it's true. All he has to say is, we have this position and you can't falsify it. And if you can't falsify it, then you have not demonstrated the impossibility of the contrary. Sorry, I'm trying to keep up with the comments as well. Sorry, guys, I'm trying to keep up with these. Okay. We're talking about backgrounds here. I don't know why. Oh, we're talking about Jay's backgrounds. Okay. My background's not much better. It's just my freaking living room. So I'm actually, I do woodworking on the side. And so I have a room that I really want to build out and put in some like inset cabinetry and then put in a bookshelf. Yeah, I mean, because I'm running out of places to put my books in my normal bookshelf. Anyway, so I might end up having a background like Jay, so don't hate on it. But I don't know if it looks like, if it looks pretentious, but anyways, that's completely beside the point. All right. Oh yeah, dumb simpleton. I feel bad calling you that. I'm glad you could make it this time. All right, so let's jump back into it.
That's not what? Say, I'm sorry.
That's not actually a position that gives an account for the transcendental categories.
I mean, it might not be a position people hold, but it is actually a position.
It's not a position that gives an account, and that's what we're looking for here. It's not just any position. It's a position that has to give an account for the possibility and the presuppositions for the preconditions for knowledge.
I'm curious. Do you have like an understanding of what trivialism is?
No, I heard you say it, but I don't know what you're talking about.
So I was, yes, we are all dumb simpletons. So when I was listening to this video, again, I was picking up breakfast for my daughters, and I mean, it takes a lot for me to like burst out into laughter, and that was one of the few times I LOL'd. I was like, so he spent the first 4 minutes of, talking to this guy and making it seem like he understood what he was saying, well, your position, that position doesn't account for the preconditions. And then he finally just admitted he doesn't even know what the position is. And I was so glad that the interlocutor like asked him, do you even understand what trivialism is? And I'm glad he admitted it. Kudos to him for admitting it, but he could have done that. He could have done that like 3 minutes ago. Like, I don't know what trivialism is. So yeah, doesn't applying the trivialist critique depend on classical logic? No, it doesn't. That's the point. Like a trivialist position, if it affirms all propositions, it doesn't depend on a classical logical formal system. That's the interlocutor's whole point. So, all right, let's keep going.
Okay, so trivialism would be it's going to accept some kind of dialectic logic, and it's going to say every proposition that is possible is true, all of them, right? So any proposition that is contained within a system is going to be symmetric with the position of trivialism. So if you hold the Eastern Orthodox position, is going to be contained within the system of trivialism.
It really bugs me. Sorry, like Jay Dyer is such a smug asshole. Like, it really bothers me when he's listening to someone and he's just like, he has to fucking shake his head all the time and he has to roll his eyes. It's like, dude, just listen to the guy. Like, he's already formed his conclusion that he fucking knows everything, right? Like, I hate when he does that, when he just sits there and rolls his goddamn eyes. Like, just sorry, sorry, John Buck. I didn't mean to say goddamn. Yeah, like, it just bothers me that he's so freaking smug and arrogant like that. But anyways, hey, it's his own channel. Do you, Jay? Do you? Sorry, I'm gonna rewind here because maybe I'll shut up.
With the position of trivialism. So if you hold the Eastern Orthodox position is going to be contained within the system of trivialism. So if trivialism cannot provide an account, then the Eastern Orthodox cannot provide an account.
Yeah, but see, you're assuming that the way that you would demonstrate this position is that it's like this theoretical position that's purely abstracted that supposedly includes any other position, right?
I mean, it would be something like that. It's
right, but like what I'm saying is that that doesn't function to resolve the issue of grounding and justification for all of the transcendental categories. And so it's not actually subsuming my position, because my position has a mutual exclusivity that doesn't allow it to be subsumed under any other position.
That would actually be true also under trivialism. So trivialism,
then that's a incoherent philosophy that doesn't actually work.
Boom. So right there, that's an incoherent philosophy. So again, Jay is critiquing trivialism from a classical logical formal system, right? He's saying, given classical logic, what you just said is incoherent. And he's right, because under trivialism affirms propositions like P and not P. It affirms the truth of contradictory propositions. That doesn't matter because trivialism is not predicated on a classical logical formal system. So again, this is why I gave you guys the example of Euclidean and non-Euclidean geometry. This is like saying, no, it's impossible for two parallel lines to intersect. Whereas somebody who affirms non-Euclidean geometry would say, well, no, that's just if you're using a Euclidean formal system. In a non-Euclidean geometry, lines that appear parallel can actually intersect, right? That's why I gave that example of Euclidean geometry. So Jay's performing an externalist critique instead of an internalist critique. So he's just saying, from my formal system, that doesn't work. And that's too freaking bad, because trivialism is not predicated on a classical logic formal system. So this is what I mean, where Jay doesn't understand. He doesn't understand these different formal systems, and he doesn't understand that he's giving an external critique. And later on, he even says, like, no, I'm giving an internal critique. And he doesn't understand it. All right, let's keep going.
So you can't subsume mutually exclusive positions just by saying, well, I include your position in my position. That's not actually a real position.
I mean, whether or not it's a real position, it's a hypothetical position.
So then it doesn't work to but I'm interested in a worldview that grounds real positions in reality, and that position doesn't do that. So it's not grounding anything. It's just a hypothetical that doesn't do any grounding work.
It would do the same grounding work that your position would do. If your position,
no, it doesn't, because my position is mutually exclusive to that position. That's not a real position. Your position doesn't have anything. Do you agree? Do you understand that my position is mutually exclusive to yours?
No, it's not.
It is. It is, because it may.
So again, he doesn't understand it, right? His position is not mutually exclusive. It's subsumed under trivialism. You could say every position is subsumed under trivialism, because every proposition under trivialism is true, right? So, and again, this is really important. You don't actually have to affirm that trivialism is true. All it has to be is a possible position that cannot be falsified. So therefore, the presuppositionalist, the tag proponent, like Jay, cannot demonstrate the impossibility of the contrary. Again, I don't even think the interlocutor is a trivialist. I'm not a trivialist. It doesn't matter. All that matters is that it is a position that cannot be refuted by Jay to account for knowledge, and therefore Jay cannot ever demonstrate the impossibility of the contrary, no matter how silly you think trivialism is. And by the way, philosophers agree that, yeah, most of them don't think that it's a true position. It doesn't have to be true. It just needs to be a possible position. And in this case, it's a possible position that can't be refuted by Jay. That's the point. Sorry, someone said, which debate is this? Who is Jay's opponent? I don't know who Jay's opponent is. It's just somebody that called in. So Yeah, I don't know who his opponent is. He's about to kick him off because he can't refute what he's saying. So of course he's going to. We have some Jay Dyer fanboys in the chat, which is totally cool. But here we go, calling people absolute fools. Like, you guys are definitely Jay Dyer's offspring, aren't you? Like, dude, just chill and have a conversation. You don't need to start calling people fools. All right, sorry, let's keep it going.
Makes a totality claim for an entire paradigm. So what you're talking about isn't even a thing.
I mean, it is a thing, but
it doesn't get if it doesn't ground a paradigm, then it's not a thing.
Imagine I took all the propositions that you hold, all of them.
You are thinking of a position as if it can be a purely hypothetical, and I'm asking for a grounding of things like history, meaningful history of ethics in reality. So your position, by definition, cannot do that. So it's not actually a thing.
Well, then you would have to hold also that your position can't do that if that follows, right? Like that, if
no, my position is an argument about reality and history.
Yeah, I mean, again, he just doesn't understand. Even after trivialism was explained to him, he's still, I mean, I don't understand how he doesn't get it. If trivialism is true, every proposition that Jay holds to is also the case under trivialism. So anything that Jay thinks he can account for under his presupposition, under his, I wish I could talk today and articulate, everything that Jay predicates on his worldview or everything that he promulgates would also be accounted for or would also be promulgated under trivialism. All right.
Do you understand what I'm saying? That it's a paradigm level argument, and you're trying to say, I'm going to avoid that critique by acting like there's a hypothetical that avoids paradigm level argumentation.
Yeah, I don't think you're responding to the position, if I'm honest.
I'm sorry that you think that, but I am responding to it.
Can you maybe give me an idea of, like, repeat back to me what you think the position I'm talking about is? Like,
you're saying that you can create a hypothetical that is unfalsifiable by subsuming my position under this hypothetical position. And I'm saying that this has the appearance of argument, but it doesn't actually work, because what I'm asking for grounding and justification is not a mere hypothetical. A hypothetical can be useful in an argument, such as possible world arguments, right? But possible world arguments can't function as justification and grounding.
So first off, this is just, I don't understand why Jay would say this, like a hypothetical, is like inefficacious here. That's not true, right? Remember that Jay is promulgating the impossibility of the contrary. He's saying there's no other possible worldview that can account for knowledge, that can account for the transcendentals. So of course we're going to posit other hypothetical worldviews, and it's Jay's job to demonstrate that none of those other hypothetical worldviews can account for knowledge and can account for the supposed transcendentals. So I don't know why he's like planting a flag in, oh, this is just a hypothetical position, it's not a real position. I mean, like most positions in philosophy are hypothetical positions, right? Some people hold to them, but there's lots of positions that are just hypothetical. That's how we think about them. That's how we conceive of them. So I really don't understand Jay's argument here, right? Again, in order for you to be able to demonstrate the impossibility of the contrary, you have to be able to entertain hypotheticals and provide an internal critique of those hypotheticals in order to falsify them. And that's what he can't do with trivialism. He's just not able to do it. All right. Sorry, I'm just reading some of the comments. If contradictions exist, then it contradicts itself. So, yeah, again, this is assuming a classical logical formal system. I don't know if you missed the beginning of the stream where I talked about how there's different formal systems. And so if you're providing an external critique from the view of classical logic, that's not going to work, because these other views are not predicated on classical logic. They're predicated on non-classical logic. So saying that they contradict themselves, right? Take someone who's like a dialetheist and holds to pair-consistent logic. If you said, hey, this is, you have two propositions that contradict each other, they would say, yeah, and? I hold to a pair of consistent logic. You can't say, well, but the contradiction means your system is inconsistent. No, it means it's inconsistent from a classical logical formal system, not from a non-classical logical formal system, if that makes sense. All right. Hey, Juan, good to see you. Simpleton says, how do you think Agrippa's trilemma would be handled by a Dyerite? Well, I don't know. I've seen different videos of Jay claiming that Agrippa's trilemma is not really an issue, that it's not really a trilemma, and that there's a fourth option. But I know that he just believes like God is the ground of everything. So it's weird because it seems like Jay would reject foundationalism. But the way that presuppositionalists talk a lot of times, they talk like foundationalists, just foundationalists who allow circularity. So it's weird because it's like he allows a foundationalist, like gives a foundationalist answer to Agrippa's trilemma, but then also allows in circularity, which is a different horn of the trilemma, if I'm conceiving it correctly. But I could be wrong about that. All right. Sorry, all right, let's get back to the video.
So think about it like this. Maybe I can, because I still don't think you're responding to it, but I'll try again really quickly. So if I take all the propositions you hold to be true, and I hold all those propositions,
yeah, but you're misunderstanding that one of the propositions in my worldview is that no other worldview can be combined with this worldview. It's mutually exclusive. So you can't just subsume it under a position.
And that would be true under trivialism as well. So all of those.
No, it wouldn't. It would be contradictory.
And that's okay under trivialism. So
again, like Jay he doesn't get it, right? So this is my point. Jay doesn't get that there's different formal systems related to logic. And so all he's doing is he's giving an external critique when he should be giving an internal critique, right? So he just keeps saying, well, I mean, he's not saying this, but essentially what he's doing is he's saying, given a formal system based in classical logic, your position is incoherent. And that's fine, but trivialism is not predicated on a formal system of classical logic. Okay, so Jay just doesn't get it the whole time. He doesn't get it, and you'll see in a little bit he's going to rage quit because he can't refute what this guy is saying.
That's why.
Okay, so if a position can be contradictory, then you've lost the argument from the outset.
Well, that's just an external critique. That's exactly
no, it's not. It's a critique from internal to that system that you're arguing for. If your system accepts contradictions, then it's not. You can't argue.
I don't think you understand.
I do understand it, and what you're saying is retarded.
That's just an external critique, but okay.
What you're saying is retarded. This is the high IQ promulgations of Jay Dyer.
It's not an external critique because it's a critique from what you said the system is. How is it an external critique when it's from what you're saying that you can contradict within your arguments, right?
It's a freaking external critique, Jay, because you're critiquing it from a classical logic. You're critiquing it from a different formal system. Again, guys, this is like trying to critique non-Euclidean geometry. This is like saying, again, that you can't have parallel lines or lines that look parallel that intersect because the parallel postulate of Euclidean geometry says that. But again, that's doing an externalist critique or an external critique. Not an externalist critique. That's engaging in an external critique from a Euclidean geometrical formal system to a non-Euclidean geometrical formal system. It doesn't work. That's the same reason that Jay's argument doesn't work here, and he just doesn't understand it. He thinks he's undercutting everything that this dude is saying, but this guy's running circles around him because Jay doesn't understand the difference here.
Your worldview. This is what you have to resort to. This is what the atheist has to resort to. I can come up with this non-existent hypothetical thing that doesn't do any grounding, and it allows for contradictions, but it's unfalsifiable. That's what you're arguing.
That's the problem.
That's retarded. Exactly. That's why you're gone. Goodbye. So this is what these guys are left with, right? This is what they're left with. Literally the dumbest shit I've ever heard.
It's the dumbest shit he's ever heard, because he's never heard this stuff before. He's never gone through different logical systems or formal systems, despite the fact that at the beginning of this stream, he said, no, yeah, I've heard all that, and they don't account for knowledge, so on and so forth. This is also why, guys, like, regarding the 2 videos that I made on Jay Dyer, I had a lot of people like, go debate Jay, call into his live streams. I was like, I don't mind debating Jay, but I'm not going to call into his live stream, because when he's leading the conversation and he can hang up on you and he can try to dog walk you, I'm not going to play that game. Like, if I ever do debate Jay, it'll not be me calling into his live stream. It'll be a formal, controlled debate where we can have different areas where one of us can control the questions for a certain amount of time, and then the other person can control the questions. Because, yeah, you call into his live stream, and this is what he does. When he can't refute you, he just hangs up on you. And the interlocutor was super patient, very nice guy. So, again, Jay Dyer just hung up on him because he couldn't refute what he was saying. So, yeah, I mean, that's really the end of his interaction with that guy. That guy, I think everything he didn't say a single thing that I disagreed with. Again, you don't have to affirm trivialism. You don't actually have to think that it's true. All you have to think of is that it's a possible position, and it seems like the presuppositionalist is not able to refute it. Okay. So I thought that was interesting. I had never seen that video before. I don't know. Someone here in the chat said that they had seen that video before. I'd be interested to see how long ago that happened, because I don't sit down and watch Jay Dyer live streams, so I don't know when that happened. But I just barely saw that video because it was clipped. And like I said, I was like laughing the whole way through as I was driving home. I just couldn't I couldn't stop laughing because Jay just doesn't get it. Let's see. Dyerites are the worst. They're half as smart as Dyer. Don't even fully understand Dyer's positions, then go into other streaming spamming them. I just don't understand, like, I get that Jay's an asshole. Why do all the followers have to be assholes too? It's the same with Jim Bob. Like, all the people that follow him are just fucking assholes. Like, just learn how to have a conversation. You don't need to call people names. You don't need to call people fools. Just make your point, you know? And then Jim Bob got super like pissy with me because I also called him out for being a Christian, and he just acts like a freaking asshole. And I'm like, dude, I act better than you. Like, I can engage in a civil discourse and good faith dialogue better than you, dude. And you're supposed to be the one representing Christ. Don't even get me down that rabbit hole. Anyways, so yeah, I just don't understand why, like, all of Dyer's little minions, and like, look, they're never gonna admit that Jay got owned here. Like, he clearly did. I mean, he didn't understand what trivialism was, and I'm glad that he admitted it, right? And then he couldn't argue against it, and then even when he was trying to argue against it, he thinks that he's doing an internal critique when he's doing an external critique. He doesn't understand different formal systems and how those relate to internal critiques and external critiques. So, all right. Yeah, Lucas Gage said they are supposed the people of faith, but argue in bad faith. Yeah, that's why I also think, like, I don't understand why Jay goes on attacking people like Trent Horn and Gavin Ortland, especially Gavin. Like, I really like Gavin Ortland. He's a really, really sweet dude. He's a really nice guy, and I just don't understand why you would want to shit all over him, especially if he's in the faith with you. I know he's not an Eastern Orthodox. I believe he's Protestant, but still, like, you guys are all trying to fight the good fight and follow Christ, and I don't understand why you have to be an asshole. But what do I know? All right. I think this is Wime from Twitter. Me and Wime are best friends. He said, our conversation about this wouldn't be intelligible if trivialism is actually true. We are depending on classical logic to discuss this. Well, no, because trivialism, again, just posits that every proposition is true. So it would be true that it's intelligible, right? You could say, well, it's also true that it's unintelligible. And the answer is yes. But if you're claiming that those two put together, right, makes a system inconsistent, then you're relying on a classical logic formal system. So you would still be you would still be promulgating an external critique. Okay. Gavin is a great guy, John. Haven't you heard of the concept of righteous anger? Okay. All righty. So that was that video, guys. And I didn't want one stream to just be based on one 10-minute video. So I figured we'd go ahead and throw in a second one in there. This one is not based on trivialism, but it is based on laws of logic. So let me throw on another video here. Thank you guys for watching. Man, it looks like all I need to do to get viewers to watch my streams is to just do Jay Dyer content all the time. Because this is the most viewers. I mean, this is only my second stream, but my first stream I certainly didn't get as many. So I'm sure all the Jay Dyer fans are here. And hey, if you like Jay Dyer, I have no problem. Just don't act like an asshole. It's easy. It's easy. All right. Let's go to the next one. Am I sharing this one? Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm sharing the right video. Give me 1 sec. All right, so this next one is and again, these aren't Jay's titles because I don't think this is his channel, Jay Dyer, O Dyer, or whatever it is. It's just, I think, a fan of his. But this one is, can God defy the laws of logic? And this is actually a question that I've constantly posed to presuppositionalists. I don't think it's necessarily an issue for just normal Christians, but for presups, I think you can run into some issues. So here we go. And sorry, let me just preface this with, I think this person talking with Jay is a Christian, and I don't think that, I think they're just asking for clarification. So this isn't like I don't believe this is an atheist or anyone who's challenging Jay. I think he just wants clarification on the laws of logic. Don't we all?
Unmute. Yo.
Yo, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Hello. I just wanted to ask a quick question. So, I heard a lot of times about this saying about if God can break the laws of logic. I need to understand that, and I don't know if that can be a contradiction itself as an argument. I don't think it's an argument itself, so I just wanted to ask about it.
Well, I think
so. Yeah, I like to pose this question to presuppositionalists, and I usually just ask them. Is it the case that God is bound by logic, or is it not the case that God is bound by logic? And all I mean by that is, again, thinking through what we talked about earlier, is like, do the axioms of a classical logic system, of that formal system, do they apply to God himself, right? Is he in some sense bound by classical logic? Is it impossible for God to either be is it possible for, a proposition to be both P and not P involving God, right? Is that possible, or is that impossible? And the reason I like to pose that question is because if you say that God is in some sense bound by logic, then, the precept, there's a lot of precepts that they use tag, and they go from the laws of logic and they try to deduce God from the laws of logic, right? They'll say things like the laws of logic are eternal, unchanging, so they must reflect an eternal, unchanging mind, and so on and so forth. And so, my point is that I don't think the laws of logic get you to God, because either God is bound by the laws of logic, or it's not the case that he's bound by the laws of logic. So if he's bound by the laws of logic, it seems like the laws of logic in some sense precede God, not in time or anything like that, but maybe logically or ontologically, if you believe in like universals and whatnot. And if God is not bound by logic, right, then if you're still predicating a formal logical system of God, then that runs into issues, because then you have contradictions. But anyways, let's go ahead and see what Jay has to say.
think the laws of logic are features that describe the created order. So logic is something that pertains to the created order, kind of like math. So they're reflections of principles in the divine mind. They're not things that determine God's essence or nature. So we don't.
So again, this is really interesting, especially because Jay just was throwing rocks at trivialism because it affirms actual contradictions. But if you're going to affirm that, God, in a sense, created logic, and Jay actually says that in a subsequent video that we'll watch. He actually says like God created logic, which is really strange. But he says logic is a reflection of the created order. Well, then God is uncreated. So does logic then not reflect God? And then he says logic reflects God's essence. But how is that the case if you just said logic only reflects the created order? He also said just like only math applies to the created order, which is also strange. I mean, do mathematical truth, like necessary mathematical truths, are those like, do those not apply to the realm that's like not part of the created realm? So that just seems to me confused. And I think it leads to contradictions in itself, which again, that is a problem if you affirm a classical logic formal system, which Jay does, right? It seems to lead to a contradiction, but let's keep going.
Don't sit there and say God is, subservient to or under the laws of logic. Rather, it's the other way around, that God exists. That becomes the grounding for the laws of logic. So a lot of people want to put the cart before the horse, and they put the thing that is grounded in God before God and make God submit to that. That's what you see in a lot of Roman Catholic argumentation about the divine simplicity or the energies or any of that kind of stuff. So we just, it's the other way around.
So you'd like view it as basically a part of the nature of God or something like that? Or
no, it's a reflection. So logic is a feature of the created order that is based on the uncreated logi in the mind of God. So there's a logi for every principle of logic or number or whatever that exists.
Right. So then the question can be posed, because logic is just a reflection of the created order, could God have made it such that the created order did not reflect classical logic? Could God have made a created order that reflected a pair-consistent logic, which again, some people believe that the world, like Dialethius, again, as we covered earlier, believe that the world reflects like a pair-consistent logic. So yeah, I mean, could God have made a created order that did not play by the rules of classical logic? Right? Why or why not? This seems to provide an issue, right? And again, if it only applies to the created order, in what sense does it apply to God? Can it be the case that P and not P is true with propositions that refer to God? Again, if you say no, then you're affirming that God is in some sense bound by logic. And therefore, how can he be the source of it if he's bound by it? Could God have made the world the balloon animal? All right, let's keep going.
In the mind of God, but they're not identical. The logi are uncreated, but logic and these kinds of things are creatures and they're created. That's why Maximus says that universals can perish. That's not the Platonic position. Plato says universals are the monad. They are the one. So it's a non-Platonic position.
So it's an impossibility. It doesn't actually, so itself, asking that is just self-contradicting itself, right?
Well, yeah, it's kind of a nonsense question. Like, for example, if you know what Aristotelians argue or Roman Catholics and Thomists argue, if you think about the logic, the LPT, the logical problem of the Trinity, when Muslims and Jake and people like that use the LPT, they're trying to take a principled analytic philosophy or logic or predication and then say that the Christian view violates logic and therefore it's not true. But it's not understanding that you can't smash God into one type of naming or one type of descriptor or one type of modern analytical philosophy, because that's not the type of being that God is.
So this is also interesting. If you can't smash God into one type of analytical philosophical system, then why is Jay so adamant again, in our last video, that that's so adamant that he applies a classical logical framework to everything, right? Again, maybe it's the case that classical logic is not an accurate description of the real world. Again, dialethists would argue that it's not. And if there's any trivialists out there, they would argue that as well. But yeah, I mean, it just seems like Jay's a little bit confused here, and it just doesn't, it seems like whichever way you want to run it, like if you want to stay with the classical logic formal system, it runs into issues when we get to God's nature, when we get to his essence. And again, he has said that logic is created by God, which is very strange, because does classical logic apply to God creating logic, right? Because if it does, then that runs into issues. How did God create it if it already applied to him before he did that? So, all right, keep going.
So itself, he will have like another divine level that we can comprehend, and we're trying to bound
it's sort of like
we interpret.
Logic and math are like one of the divine rays that comes from the divine mind to us. God has many other things about him, right? That they don't exhaust him and they don't define him. It's sort of like if you saw me over here.
So logic doesn't define God, right? So that, again, that seems to commit Jay to the position that God is not bound by classical logic. Okay, so that means that God can engage in or perform contradictions, right? But I'm pretty sure Jay would say that that's not the case, right? So this is the issue with saying that God created logic or that God is not defined by logic, because if you say God is not defined by logic, then God can engage in contradictions, right? Which maybe there's some that are willing to bite that bullet, no problem, but I don't think Jay is, so it just seems like he's confused here. Sorry, guys, again, I'm trying to keep up with the comments here. Sometimes I don't know if the comments are geared towards me or you guys are talking to each other in the comments. So, all right, I'm just going to keep trudging along.
You're working out math problems. Would you think that math problems are my essence? No, they would be something that is sort of coming out of me or coming from me, proceeding from me. So in the same way, God shows us things about himself through principles of math and geometry and order and all that. We learn about the harmony of the divine mind.
Really quick, Jay's analogy here is a poor analogy because he's talking about math, but let's say I'm teaching you logic, right? I'm teaching you, let's say, classical logic. Do those laws of classical logic apply to me, apply to my nature and my essence? Well, yes, if you hold to a classical logical formal system. So even though the laws of logic emanate from his divine rays, why does that also mean that the laws of logic do not apply to God himself, right? So it's just a poor analogy by Jay here. Thanks, Web of Concepts. I appreciate that. Thanks for showing up. You take care. All right, let's keep going.
And the beauty of the divine mind and order and all that, but they don't exhaust him or define him.
Okay, so
if you read Dionysius, this is the way he speaks of the things that come from God, the rays, the emanations, the processions, I should say, not emanations.
Okay, from what I'm getting from most of this is that the question itself is wrong just to ask it. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that the question is premised on the idea that God is somehow definable or exhaustible by created principles.
Yeah, since he's a divine being, he cannot be defined by limited minds, and he's unlimited, so he's not bound by logic itself. He is
right. It would be violating the apophatic theology of orthodoxy, right? So apophatic theology holds that God in himself, in his essence, is unapproachable, unknowable, undefinable, inexhaustible.
So yeah, we're going to see why this runs into issues in the next video, because Jay's going to talk about how we predicate properties of God only analogously. So that's kind of what he's promulgating here. So I might wait until then to kind of jump on those.
It's the via negativa, but the way that we know him is by the energies that come down to us, as Basil says in 234.
Okay, so I mean, Could he manipulate itself? I mean, he's an all-powerful being.
All right, we're going to move on. No, he doesn't manipulate himself because he is a being with free will and a nature that defines who he is.
So really quick, why can God not manipulate himself? Does that defy logic? Right? Does that defy classical logic? Why can God not manipulate his nature? Why can God not manipulate himself? If Jay's answering he can't because that would violate some sort of law of nature or like rule of inference or inference rule, right? That would seem like he's saying that God is in some sense bound by the laws of logic, right? So again, Jay's confused here. He wants to claim that the laws of logic God is not bound by the laws of logic. He creates them, and then through the divine rays, that's how we know them. But from the other propositions he's affirming here, it makes it seem like, no, God absolutely is bound by the laws of logic. All right. I think, well, let's keep going.
Is and how he acts. So God can't change his nature because that would be ultimately going against who he himself is. So, for example, when Paul says it's impossible for God to lie, Paul says that because God's nature and character is holy, he can't do evil or bad things. And so
why, if it's impossible for God to lie, does that entail that he can't lie? Right? Again, this assumes that logical laws and whatever's derived from those apply to God, right? This just seems like an issue for a precept like Jay. Again, it doesn't necessarily seem like an issue for just your normal Christian, but again, the preceptor is the one claiming that it's the laws of logic that allow us to infer the existence of God, and that God is not bound by these laws. But then, the same thing that they're using to try to prove God seems like it runs into issues when you try to predicate those of God. All right.
What we consider possible or impossible is going to be determined by our worldview. So a lot of times low-tier atheists will say, well, to be omnipotent means you can literally do anything. And if you can't make yourself not exist, then you're not omnipotent. Well, that's not what omnipotent means in the Christian paradigm. And all of these words and terms are going to be determined by the paradigm from which they're situated. Vertical view.
Okay, so.
All right, we just jumped to the other video. All right, nice. Okay, I don't really have much more to comment there because I think I've hopefully made my point. We're going to look at one more video. Thank you guys for being here again. If you missed the beginning of the stream, I kind of laid out the notion of what a formal system is because we were originally talking about formal systems of logic. So just if you came in a little bit later, I would highly recommend you go back later and watch that, just because I think it really, really helps paint the picture of why Jay is confused, or why he was especially confused in his first video. This next video, we're not going to watch the whole thing because it's just an interlocutor who, again, pisses Jay off. And she only talks to him for like a good maybe 5 minutes, and then he just, talks himself, or he talks with Father Deacon about the issue. But I really just want to highlight. I will say that this interlocutor, she maybe deserved to get booted because she was a little bit mouthy and a little I don't know. She wasn't antagonistic. But you could tell she had a little chip on her shoulder when she was talking to Jay. So I do understand kind of why you booted her, but she was asking good questions. So here's give me 1 sec. Give me one good reason. Okay. All right, so yeah, this next one doesn't really have much to do with logic. I know that this stream was supposed to be about how Jay Dyer doesn't understand logic. I think we've demonstrated that already, hopefully. But this one is about knowledge. And I thought that the individual who's dialoguing with Jay here, I thought that she asked really good questions. Again, I don't think that hold on, I gotta highlight this, man. It's of course a Jay Dyer fanboy. Guy who has no epistemological grounding for logic existing tries to explain how other guy doesn't understand logic. Well, first of all, this stream isn't about me giving an epistemic grounding for logic. We can do that in another stream. But second, if you were here at the beginning of the stream, you would see how trying to prove axioms doesn't make any sense. You can't prove axioms in a formal system. So I'm sorry, buddy. I'm sorry, pum, but you don't know what you're talking about. All right, I'm sorry. But it is peak content. I agree with you there. Anyways, all right, so let's jump into this next one. Sorry, what I was going to say is, yeah, the individual who Jay's dialoguing with here, she asks good questions. Jay does not give good answers. She is a little lippy, and then he boots her. Of course he does. But anyways, let's jump into it.
Oh, is it my turn? I don't have an argument. I just have like a question.
Okay.
Or a few questions. I hear a lot of theists, to get out of problems, they like say that God doesn't actually have a mind. Is that your position, or do you think God has a mind and beliefs?
No, we believe in the divine mind. Sure.
Okay, so I'm an epistemological nihilist. I don't think like anybody can have justified true beliefs. So, including God, like how would God justify his axioms?
God doesn't have to justify anything because he is the self-referencing authority within the system. So doesn't even make sense. If God exists, if Christianity is true, that would be like a nonsense question.
Well, I mean, so he doesn't have justification for it. I take knowledge to be justified true belief. So if he doesn't have the justified true belief, something like the laws of logic are true, then he doesn't know the laws of logic are true.
So I do think her question is her question is good in the sense of she's asking if knowledge is justified true belief, and we want to say God has knowledge, does God have beliefs that are justified? But she turns this into justifying the laws of logic, which again, if you view laws of logic as axioms, it is kind of a question that doesn't exactly make sense, unless you think that, well, the laws of logic in a formal system, they're just these axioms, but they are like these ontological universals that need an account. So maybe it would make sense there. I don't know exactly how she meant it, but excuse me. But her question is a valid question. If God has knowledge, if you want to say that God has knowledge, and we understand knowledge to be justified true belief, then does God have beliefs that are justified? One thing that you're going to see that Jay makes a weird category error regarding is he keeps saying God doesn't have to justify his beliefs to anyone, which I would agree, but that's not what justified true belief means, right? A justified true belief, right, is a belief that's true, that has a good reason, right, for one to believe it, for one to affirm that specific proposition. So it doesn't mean that you have to provide the justification to someone. So this is kind of the rabbit hole Jay goes down. He keeps saying like God doesn't have to justify his beliefs to anyone. Again, I agree. If God exists, I don't think he has to justify his beliefs. To me, the question is just, does the concept of knowledge apply to God? And if so, then does God have justified true beliefs?
Again, within the system of Christianity, God would not be subject to the laws of the created order because he's the one that put them into place. So God doesn't have to give justified true belief to humans. He is the justification.
So you think God created the laws of logic?
Correct.
So again, I found that strange that Jay claimed that God created the laws of logic, especially because, again, most pre-suppers will claim that the laws of logic are like eternally existing with God, that they're eternally existing necessary truths. But Jay's claiming that they were created. So again, we kind of run into the same issue that we just saw previously. Like if God created the laws of logic, then does that mean that the laws of logic themselves don't apply to God, and therefore can God engage in contradictions? So just an interesting question to ask, but let's keep going.
Oh, wow. I've never heard that one before. So there was a time in which they didn't exist?
So the logic that's applicable to the created order is a reflection of one of the divine rays. In other words, it tells us something about the divine mind, but it doesn't exhaust it, and it doesn't logically define the divine mind. So God is not defined by created logic, even though just like anything else in the created order, right? Like we would say, for example, that human beings are made in the image of God. I can't take principles about me as a creature and list them about how I'm finite and I exist in time, and these things make up me as a human being, and then say God has to then submit to that. You got it backwards, and that's what all atheists and all nihilists do. It's a form of idolatry where you have it backwards.
Well, I didn't follow everything you said, but I'm sorry. Are you saying God does not have the justified true belief that the laws of logic are true?
So again, what we mean by justified true belief will be determined by the system in question. So you're trying to take something from an atheist paradigm and say God has to submit to that. Well, if God exists, he is the ultimate justifier, the ultimate truth, the ultimate basis for our beliefs. So it would be a nonsense question to say God has to give justified true belief.
Again, he seems to just keep saying God doesn't have to give justified true belief, but that's not the question. The question is, does God have justified true belief, right? I would at least think that God has beliefs, right? I mean, even if you want to say, yes, the divine mind is so wholly other than our minds, does God assent to propositions? Does he agree that certain propositions are true? That's really all it means to have a belief, right? To agree with the proposition. So, I mean, I would assume God agrees with propositions, so God has beliefs, and then the question would just be, are God's beliefs justified? Again, if I were a Christian, I would say absolutely. God does have justification for his beliefs. It seems weird to say no, or to just say that this concept doesn't apply to God. And Jay's whole argument is, well, you're saying that God has to give justification to humans. That's not what this girl is saying.
So he does not have. So the answer is yes, he does not have justified true belief.
Well, I would qualify that and say.
All right, just wanted to let you know this stream, Jay's streaming with Father Deacon. And I like Father Deacon. I wish Jay and Jim Bob and Andrew Wilson and all these other these ortho bros, I really wish they would follow Father Deacon a little bit better, because Father Deacon can have a civil conversation from what I've seen. Father Deacon is a little bit more philosophically astute, kind of like what Jay pretends to be. And so anyway, so this is Father Deacon that's talking, in case you didn't. When I was first listening to the video, I was like, what's going on? I thought I started playing another video, but it's just Father Deacon talking.
That there's an equivocation. When we say that human beings know something, we mean something like a belief held for the right reasons, i.e. a true justified belief. And then we say God knows. There's something of an analogy, but that what Jay's trying to say is that doesn't mean everything that we say and how we define human knowledge therefore maps onto God, so that he forms belief in are they true and is it justified? Well, not in the same way that we do.
Well, what's the common property?
So Father Deacon kind of steers this in a much better direction than Jay was, right? Father Deacon is saying, like, yes, God has knowledge, but it's analogous. It's based on analogy. It's not so. You have equivocation, or you have properties that are univocal, meaning they mean the same thing, equivocal, meaning they don't mean the same thing whatsoever, and then you have their analogous, right? So that they have properties that are similar, but they're not the exact same, so they're not univocal. So that's fine. Like, I think that's a good answer. The problem is, what you're going to see is the interlocutor then starts asking, okay, well, what are the common properties? Because you can't just say two things are analogous, right? Unless you can at least identify the properties that they have in common. Because remember, if you're identifying an analogy between two things, you're saying they have some things in common, but they're not completely identical, right? They're not completely the same or proportional. So you need to be able to identify what are the properties that they have in common. And this is where Jay really starts to get annoyed, because the interlocutor, this girl, is going to start asking him, so what's the property they have in common? And Jay can't give an answer. And it seems like Father Deacon doesn't talk after this. So to me, it didn't seem like Father Deacon could give an answer either.
With the way we do.
We do.
Well, what's the common property with the way we do?
It's an analogy. So God's
analogies have a common property.
Right. So the analogy is that there is a likeness.
So what's the common property?
I'm telling, if you don't stop interrupting, then I'm going to boot you because you're not listening.
Calm down, sir.
Don't. You're on my channel. I'm not upset. You don't tell me to calm down. So again, our theology is premised on analogical predication, which means that there's a similarity between, for example, the divine mind and a human mind. So the fact that, for example, we have concepts, right? There's a concept in my mind before.
So really quick, again, what Jay's saying there is actually fine, right? He's saying we're talking analogically. That's fine. but he's never able to give the property that is similar between our knowledge and God's knowledge. And then right now he's going to go into an analogy that doesn't apply to what we're talking about. He's just going to go into an analogy about how about our concepts and God's concepts, but we're talking about knowledge, and he never gives a property that's similar between our knowledge and God's knowledge. So
before I go to build a house, I have a conception of it. And we would say that that concept bears a similarity to the concepts that God has, for example, before he created. And so the one example of an analogical predication would be the divine ideas. I have ideas, God has ideas, but there's not a one-to-one correspondence between God's ideas and my ideas. And so the argument that you're giving is premised on what's called univocal predication. So if I believed in univocal predication, which some theists have believed in, your objection would be a good argument. But I don't believe in univocal predication, so it's not a good argument.
So again, Jay didn't really give an analogy that deals with knowledge, right? Now, he did say that, yes, your question, like, does God have knowledge or not? And if you're saying he doesn't have justified true belief, that would be an issue if we were predicating knowledge of us and knowledge of God univocally. That he's right in that, but the interlocutor is still asking, okay, but what is if you're going to say that we have knowledge and God has knowledge analogously, then what is the common property, right? You can't just say that it's analogous unless you can identify the property that is similar between them. And you'll see that this is where Jay, he starts to get a little uppity. And again, the interlocutor is a little snippy as well, so I get it, but he's going to get uppity and then he's going to rage quit on her.
So there is or is not a common property in the justification when we say
I just gave you an example of a common property. I said a divine idea there's an analogy between the two. Again.
So he did not give a common property related to knowledge. He just gave an analogy based on man's mental concepts and God's divine concepts. But we're not talking about that, right? We're talking about knowledge, right? Justified true belief. If we have knowledge and God has knowledge analogously, what is the common property between them? I don't even think that this question is a gotcha. It's strange to me that Jay can't and won't answer the question.
Your argument.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm not hearing the common property.
I gave you an example of something that shares a similarity.
He gave an example of a different analogy. That's not what she's asking for.
Are you capable of naming the common property?
I gave you an example of a divine idea and a human idea.
I'm talking about justification.
So that's a different question from the first question you asked. Okay, you didn't ask for justification. You asked for what is the analogia, and I gave it to you. Now you're asking for justification. That's a different question.
No, I'm asking when you say we're justified versus God is justified, you're saying it's a different kind of justification, right?
No, I said that God doesn't have to give justified true belief within our worldview.
That's my question. Good to God.
So again, now Jay's pivoting back to God doesn't have to give justification. That's not the question, dude. The question is not, does God have to give justification? The question is, does God have justification for his beliefs? That's the question.
Doesn't have justified true beliefs then.
So God is omniscient. He doesn't have beliefs. He doesn't learn new facts, right?
It boggles my mind that people think that Jay is so philosophically sophisticated. He can't even understand what this person is asking. First off, to have a belief doesn't mean you formed the belief. If God is omniscient, he just always had those beliefs, right? Why would you say God doesn't have a belief? God does not affirm propositions? That's one of the stupidest things I've ever heard. That's incoherent. God does not affirm propositions, so God doesn't have beliefs. And Jay just takes this to mean God doesn't learn any new things. That's not what a belief means, right? I mean, God could conceivably just hold all the beliefs that he holds throughout all eternity. Why would he need to learn new things? Jay's just completely confused here. Completely confused.
That would be
omniscient means he knows all true propositions.
Yeah, that doesn't mean that he learns things. That doesn't mean he learns new facts. That doesn't mean he learns new facts, right?
Again, holding a belief has nothing to do with learning new facts. Yes, you can hold a belief as the result of learning a new fact, but that's not a necessary relation. It is possible. Again, it is conceivable that God could have just held all of his divine beliefs from eternity. Jay's I don't understand this at all.
It means that he knows.
You think that God doesn't have beliefs?
All right, this is getting retarded. You're done. Get out of here. Let's move on. So
So there we go. I mean, I thought she was asking good questions. Again, I thought she was a little lippy, which is fine though, because Jay's just as lippy. Although Jay kept his cool here, which was fine. I mean, he did rage quit, but at least he kept his cool. I don't know if you guys saw the debate. Jay debated this guy twice, and I don't know the guy's name. He has like a crown on his head or something, and he's a Unitarian. And I mean, him and Jay were just getting into like the most petulant debate I've ever seen. Like, I wish Jay would have kept his cool because the other guy looked really bad, but Jay also looked just as bad. They were just like arguing like children. It was interesting, but and yeah, when he's in a corner, he kicks you and calls you retarded. Yeah, I mean, that's what he does. That's what he does. That's what Jim Bob does. That's what they just all in that little group. That's what they do, which is interesting because I came across Jay Dyer, I want to say when I was still a Christian, or I was maybe transitioning from, I was deconverting at that point. And I used to have some respect for him because I had watched his debate with Dillahunty and Malpass. And back then he used to kind of compose himself a lot better. But now he just he's so self-aggrandizing. He chest thumps all the time. He's super petulant. And I think he has such a high view of himself. Like, he will never consider the possibility that he's wrong on anything unless he's told by like Father Deacon or something. But he's just so freaking full of himself, and he thinks everyone is beneath him intellectually. So it's just really, I don't know. Yeah, it's really easy to not like the guy. It's just really easy to not like him. But that says nothing about his arguments, right? So that's what we were looking at. So that was it, guys. I had those 3 videos for you. Yeah, again, I really don't want to become the guy who just has a bunch of anti-Jay Dyer content. I still have people asking me, can you make more videos on Jay Dyer? I'm like, I already have a video on tag. Thanks, John. Good to see you. Well, I didn't see you, but good to see you commenting. What was I saying? Well, I think I was saying that as I used to watch Jay, like just as I've watched Jay more over the years, my respect for him has completely dwindled. And he just acts like an asshat. But anyways, I was just going to tell you guys we're done. So thank you guys for being here. I appreciate it. I had a good time watching these videos. I'm telling you, when I watched that first video, I was just laughing out loud the whole time. It was really amusing to me. I hope you guys got something out of the formal systems, the slides I had there, because I think a lot of people don't know about that. Some people do, but apparently Jade doesn't. So I don't know. I'm still trying to hold out on a debate from Jim Bob. He keeps ducking me. Thanks a lot, Lars. I've messaged him, or I've posted multiple times on Twitter tagging him. He's seen a lot of them. He's ignored some of them, and then the other ones he answers. He asks me what the prompt is going to be, and I'm like, dude, I've already told you what the prompt is multiple times, or what the prompt can be. And then he asked me if I'm going to take a position, which is a really weird question. Like, no, dude, I'm going to debate you, but I'm not going to take a position. And then he just ignores me. So it's really weird because Jim Bob does a lot of debates. So I don't want to say he's running from a debate with me, but it does seem like he just keeps ducking my posts and whatnot. So anyways, I doubt I'll get a debate with Dyer, maybe at some point. But again, it would need to be a formal controlled debate. I would absolutely not call into his stream because that's what he does. He tries to dog walk you, and then he'll hang up on you. So you need a formal controlled debate with Mr. Jay Dyer. All right, guys. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. So thank you guys for humoring me for about an hour and a half. I appreciate the comments. I appreciate the interaction. I'm just here to learn stuff. I'm just here to teach people what I've learned, and I'm most assuredly, I don't know everything, right? So if I got anything wrong in the stream, I apologize, and I'm open to correction, okay? All right. Well, thank you guys. Have a good day. Hopefully I'll stream again soon. Actually, I might have a video coming out on presuppositionalism with a special guest, or it might be a live stream. I don't know yet, but if it's a live stream, it'll be the upcoming Tuesday. And if it's just a long form video, it should come out sometime next week, but it will be on presuppositionalism. Not all of it will be Jay Dyer, just some of it, because there's other presuppositionalists who are much more much more sophisticated than Jay, and they can behave better. But anyways, so that should be coming out next week. I have gotten a lot of messages for people that want me to do precept content. Again, I don't want to be the YouTuber that just argues against precept as well, but I do think because it's out there, that makes for good content. So keep an eye out for that. But all right, guys, have a good one. Thanks for attending. We'll see ya. Peace.